If you spend any real time studying medieval buildings, ships, barns, bridges or tools, one question eventually refuses to go away. How did wood survive centuries of rain, frost, insects and neglect without plastic membranes, chemical sealants or pressure treatment? Oak beams still holding cathedrals, planks on Viking ships that crossed oceans, farm structures that outlived the people who built them. This isn't romantic exaggeration, it's material evidence. Medieval carpenters understood something modern construction often ignores. Wood lasts longest when it is allowed to behave like wood. What they relied on was not a product in a tube, but a system of preparation, treatment and design centered around pine tar, wood ash, animal fats and breathable finishes. This knowledge wasn't theory. It was hard-earned survival craft, passed from master to apprentice, and it still outperforms many modern sealants when applied correctly. This is why medieval carpenters trusted pine tar over sealing wood airtight. The core of medieval wood preservation was pine tar, sometimes called Stockholm tar. It was produced by slowly burning resin-rich pine roots and stumps in low-oxygen pits. The result was a thick, black, antiseptic liquid that soaked deep into wood fibres rather than sitting on the surface. Unlike modern sealants that form a brittle skin, pine tar moved with the wood. It expanded in summer, contracted in winter, and remained breathable. This mattered because trapped moisture is what destroys wood, not water itself. Medieval carpenters knew that rot begins when moisture enters and cannot escape. Pine tar repelled liquid water while allowing vapour to pass, creating a self-regulating barrier. That balance is why tarred ships, fences, roofs and tools could survive decades of exposure with minimal maintenance. So, before any treatment was applied, medieval builders had to prepare the wood. And, well, preservation didn't actually start with tar at all. It began with timing. Trees were felled during the winter, when the sap content was at its lowest. This reduced the sugars that would otherwise feed fungi and insects. Once cut, logs were often left to season naturally, sometimes for years, kept under cover but still exposed to the air. The bark was removed early on to prevent insects from nesting. By the time pine tar was finally applied, the wood was already dry and stable. The tar itself was warmed, not boiled, then brushed or rubbed in over and over until basically the surface just refused to take in any more. This wasn't about making the wood look good. It was about saturation. On ships, they'd repeat this process every year. On buildings, every few years or so. The end result was wood that resisted rot, discouraged insects, and, importantly, stayed structurally flexible. Now, pine tar was rarely used all by itself. Ash, lime and fat were often added for extra protection. Wood ash, which is full of alkaline salts, could be mixed into tar or water to create an environment where fungi really couldn't thrive. Lime washes were brushed onto barns and fences to keep insects and mould at bay. And animal fats, especially tallow, were blended with tar to help it soak in deeper and boost water resistance. These combinations, honestly, created finishes that modern chemists would recognize as antifungal, antibacterial, and hydrophobic. Medieval carpenters didn't use these materials out of superstition. They observed results over generations, you know. Structures treated this way lasted longer, needed fewer repairs, and, well, failed more predictably rather than catastrophically. Why modern sealants often fail where medieval methods succeed. Modern sealants aim for total exclusion. Silicone, acrylics and synthetic paints form airtight barriers that look perfect until the first crack appears. Once breached, water enters and becomes trapped. Rot accelerates invisibly. Medieval finishes accepted that wood breathes. They anticipated movement. Instead of fighting moisture entirely, they managed it. That difference explains why many modern decks rot in 10 years, while medieval beams still stand after centuries. For survivalists, historical builders, or anyone working with untreated wood outdoors, this distinction is not academic. It determines whether your structure becomes a liability or an asset. So, here's how you can actually apply medieval wood preservation methods today. This knowledge, you know, it's not locked away in the past. Pine tar, for example, is still made using those old traditional ways. To use it properly, you want to start with dry, untreated wood. Warm the tar until it flows easily. Doesn't take much, really. Then just apply it generously with a brush or even a cloth, making sure you work it into the joints, the end grain, and all those exposed surfaces. Let it soak in, and then, well, repeat the process until you notice the absorption starting to slow down. For wood that's going to be outside, blending the tar with boiled linseed oil helps it penetrate deeper and cuts down on that sticky surface feel. If the wood will touch the ground, adding a bit of wood ash to your mix boosts its resistance even more. Now, you'll want to reapply every few years, not because the treatment fails, but because maintenance was always just part of the system. Medieval carpenters, they expected to do upkeep. That mindset, honestly, is what made their work last for centuries. What this really reveals about medieval thinking and survival knowledge is, well, quite profound. This was not primitive technology at all. It was actually optimized for real-world conditions. Medieval carpenters worked without the luxury of, easy replacement. Timber was precious and labour was slow. Failure, honestly, had real consequences. Their solutions always favoured resilience over appearance and repairability over perfection. That kind of mindset, interestingly enough, aligns closely with modern survivalist thinking and experimental archaeology. It also challenges the common assumption that newer always means better. In many cases, older simply means it's been tested longer. So, why does this knowledge still matter for historians and builders alike? Well, understanding medieval wood preservation actually changes how we interpret historical structures. It explains why certain materials were chosen, why maintenance cycles mattered, and, honestly, why some buildings survived while others vanished. For builders, reenactors, off-grid homesteaders, and maritime historians, it offers a proven alternative to chemical dependency. This isn't just nostalgia, it's evidence-based craft. If this kind of deep, practical history is why you're here, go ahead and subscribe to Iron Age Instincts. And, share this with someone who still believes medieval builders were just guessing their way through survival. They weren't, and the wood they left behind, well, it proves it.